Hey there, students, Codesters students. We uh, we started out with a framework. You could call it a framework where we set up some initial conditions. This just happens right away as soon as we hit the green play button. It immediately sets the gravity, disables the ceiling, sets the background color, and sets a new parameter called bounce, set bounce. Now we still have an interval function that's going to run every fifth of a second, and that's going to happen after creation. So I was in the middle of changing what I'm calling action to creation. We could call it back. Well, let's just leave it action. I'm thinking of like lights, camera, action, what they say in movies. And action is like, okay, let's get rolling. But you've already got the lights turned on at that point. Like there's a lot of things that have already been set up before you call action. So that's where I'm creating stage conditions of gravity, disabled ceiling, and so on. Then comes action. Then every fifth of a second for 20 seconds, we will either measure and or change some parameter. In this case, we're going to decrease the amount of bounce. Is that what I'm doing? Yeah, I'm making bounce less and less bounce. So what's that going to do? I think bounce is going to become negative at some point. So let's just run it and see what happens. And why is decreasing bounce doing this? Okay, it's slowing down and bounce, bounce, bigger bounce. So bounce is less, and yet, whoa, it went off the screen. And now what's going to happen? Gravity's still in effect. Whoa, it came rastering down, bouncing back and forth, really high speed. Let's run that again and see if we can figure out why it's doing that. So as bounce becomes less, I think a bounce of 1, we should try, whoa, there we go again. Just bouncing like crazy, the smaller it is. Let's have bounce not change. Let's have bounce. The difference is bounce equals bounce minus 0, which means we're not changing the bounce. Let's see what happens. So bounce is constant now, and it starts out where? At 1. So it pretty much goes up to the very height that it was. It's bouncing around. It's kind of attaining the same height. It's not dampening it anyway. Okay, let's try a bounce starting at 1.1. So a little bit greater than 1. What's that look like? I think it's going to, okay, it's already escaped almost. We don't have escape velocity, and it's speeding up definitely. It's becoming more and more bouncy. It's going crazy how bouncy it is. But what I was doing was decreasing the bounce. So why was it also behaving that way? In other words, if I start the bounce out at 0.8 and run it again, so now it's less than 1, what's going to happen here? It's dampening. Okay, so it's fizzling. It's ending up just scraping along the ground here. It's flatlined. So if you're constant 0.8, if you're less than 1, okay, so what if I am 0.3 to start? Very low bounce to start. What happens? It's flatlining immediately. How about a negative bounce? Does that mean anything at all? How about negative 0.3? What does that do? Negative 0.3 didn't seem to do much. How about negative 0.7? Negative 0.7, almost 1. Aha. So it starts out closer to like it would with 0.7. What if I do -1 bounce? -1 bounce. Interesting physics here. That looks about the same as 1 bounce. Okay, so I think we're kind of going around in a circle where 1 and -1 pretty much have the same effect. So what was happening before in removing bounce as time goes on, I was getting into negative territory. So I was starting with bounce 1, and then every interval I was shaving off 1/10 of bounce, let's say. But I'm going for 20 seconds. So let's see what happens here. It starts with a high bounce of 1, and as time goes on, less and less bounce. But I think it's going to go to negative bounce, and that's going to be the same as increasing bounce. So it just took off again for the skies. It should be coming back. It should be falling. Unless it's, no, it's bouncing so fast back and forth it never does get back down to where we are. I'll take bounce away a little further. 0.3 every time. We lose bounce 0.3 every time. What can we figure out from this physics? Again, it loses all its bounce, but then, whoa, speeds up like crazy. Interesting physics. Check it out.